Hello everybody, what is up? Cobra here, and today's special episode is going to be my accounts of my most expensive Conquest of the Empire game ever. Now, as some of you may know, I was working on a really big game project called, I'm not really sure what it was going to be called, but it was a Roman Empire, ancient empire themed map. It would have been huge, I think the dimensions would have been around 4 by 8, and it would have been a massive map of the Mediterranean, and would have led from the Punic Wars, which was Carthage versus Rome, up until the fall of the Roman Empire, or around, kind of depending on the date. It was based off of the game Pax Romana, and I had adapted it to be more Axis and Allies-like. But for that, I had purchased games like this game, Conquest of the Empire, and thousands of unique units for this era of time. And so what has happened recently was that I had lost all of my custom game content, which means that the massive Roman Empire game that I had been working on, that I had been building for, never came to fruition, which now means I have the most deluxe version of Conquest of the Empire probably ever seen. And in this video I want to show you guys my collection of ancient historic soldiers. So let's get into the review. After opening up the box, we are greeted by a few items. Here, of course, is the original, I think 1984, Fall of the Empire, or Conquest of the Empire map. As you can see, one of my favorite of the older maps, I'm not a huge fan of the original Axis and Allies map, but this one really gets the aesthetic down, and I like it a lot more than the newer Fall of the Conquest of the Empire map. So that is the map, and as you can see here, the box is loaded with pieces. So here we have a bunch of coins. Now, these were part of the original game, and also a few of my own additions. Basically, I had purchased a bunch of extra coins, and I also modified them. So you can see here, these ones, which came in like a bronze plastic color, I spray painted gold and gave a light dusting with silver, with green, to give it kind of like a weathered look. But as you can see, really nice looking coins, and I bought a ton of them, like spares, basically, because, of course, in my bigger game, everything was going to be larger, including stuff like economies, but now we have a ton of spares for the original map. And then, getting into the different nations, you may recognize these boxes from Global 40. I have just repurposed them for this game for now, so we'll get into all the nations sooner or later. Here we have some original just pieces of documentation for this game. As you can see, tons of nations to choose from. And as we uncover the original divider that came with the game, we are greeted with a ton of different pieces. And of course, any of you that own this game will know that there's a lot more normal pieces than usual. So here we got the original roundels. I really hate these things. They're probably some of the worst roundels I've ever seen. So I had replaced all of these. So then we have the cities, really nice looking little city pieces, and fortified cities. So, and how those would work are pretty simple. You could build the city and then place the city on top of a fortification like that, and now you have a fortified city. Here we had these are Monopoly pieces, but what I had deemed them were going to be village pieces. So, yeah, kind of just normal looking little pieces, and kind of spray painted brown to represent kind of like a wooden texture. Here we have a ton of roads. You would be able to connect the vast territories of my map together, but now if anybody really wants to build roads in this game, they definitely have the pieces to do so. And down here we have some more things, and oh, now that I remember it, these pieces weren't going to be villages, these were forts, so kind of representing like a walled structure with a little house on top, or a building or barracks. Then over here, these were villages in the darker brown. So here we have a just one version of a village, just a bigger building, and we have these little smaller buildings. And again, Monopoly pieces. And so these were basically representing villages that would be inside of your empires or abroad that you could go take over, like some barbarian towns and such. But, you know, maybe I'll have to... I want to try to modify, like, this game, add some of the original pieces, because stuff like having these villages, like, you know, civilization building was a cool aspect of mine, but now that's gone. And also the fact of my game has neutrals, basically, as many would know it. So here we can see the barbarian pool, and now, as a historian, I know that barbarians were more of the Roman description of them, but I would say other civilizations, or tribal people. And there was many different unit classes. So you can see here, all these units with round bases, and these guys specifically were from some Risk game. These are light infantry, so these are kind of like your ground pounders, cheap, not great at combat type guys. These custom infantry were supposed to represent heavy infantry. And barbarians would, again, like I said, this game was heavily inspired off of Pax Romana, which basically is a point-to-point game. You know, you can move from city to city. There's no real territories, so mine was a territory adaptation. And so basically, barbarians would be these like neutral powers that would spawn, and different nations could move them around and attack each other with them. So there was like randomness with that, and so here we have a heavy infantry representing some better trained, better equipped barbarians. And then we've got some cavalry for the barbarian peoples. Over here we have a few little things. Now, these were some elephants that came with a Risk game, but I didn't want to use these, so I've just got them in here. Maybe basically it's like an overflow pool. I've got better elephants, but these are just in case. And these are monuments that there's just two, but they were specialist things. So this guy was going to be, he would start in Alexandria, and he is, this represents the tomb of Alexander the Great, which had, basically it was a big thing where people would just, you know, steal this thing, take it, because it was so much legitimacy added to whatever king or emperor could own this. So it was the tomb was moved all across Egypt, and it got lost in history. But basically, like I said, this would start in Egypt, and whoever could capture it, you could move it around, you know, you could bring it back to Rome or whatever, and it would give you a bonus, basically, for the morale of your people. And then right here, this guy represents the Colossus of Rhodes. This was just an infantry piece that I painted silver. And he would go, of course, in the neutral country, the neutral island country of Rhodes. And basically, this guy was a little bit more simple. What you could do is, if you sailed to Rhodes and maybe captured it, you could basically dismantle the statue and get some money out of it. So it was a little bonus to the first person who conquered Rhodes. So yeah. And that does it for kind of the various pieces, and now we'll get into the actual individual nations of this game. So first up, we have the Carthaginians, which would have been the premier power starting out in the Punic Wars, as my game would have started before Rome was even really fully aligned together. So again, like I said, Carthage was the foremost power in the Mediterranean at the time, or at least in the western half of the Mediterranean. So as you can see here, we've got a Carthaginian cavalry. Let's get some better light going. And these are from I think a hat set of pieces, so lots of nice looking historical accurate uniforms for all of these Carthaginians. And though I sprayed them up in a purple, they were going to get like fully detail painted, but of course now that I don't have a main game to go with it, I'm kind of uninspired to really paint these guys up. Here we have the light infantry. These guys are what came in the Conquest of the Empire game, and As you can see, they're a little bit more armored than those other barbarian guys I showed you, so they kind of form the more well-equipped ranks, so like the Carthaginians, the Romans. Here we have the heavy infantry, and like I said, I had a pretty easy distinction between heavy and light infantry, because light infantry were these kind of, as you can see, these massed, like unposed units that had round bases, whereas the heavy infantry were just all of these kind of, these custom 172 guys. And I'm trying to find some of like the cooler looking ones in here. Oh, here we have like a general on a horse. Very cool looking piece. And of course, I do play the Conquest of the Empire game from time to time, so it gives a lot of diversity with my units in the game, which, you know, people playing with me definitely like that, but it does stink that, you know, in my games, all these infantry just represent infantry. They're not heavy or light, so yeah. But there is that new game on Historical Board Gaming, so we'll see about picking that up at some point, maybe doing a review on it. But those are kind of my infantry class units. Here we have roundels that I bought off of Historical Board Gaming. This is the Carthaginian flag. I do wish that it had been like purple, incorporated purple, since purple was such a big thing for Carthage. But this one definitely looks cool with the black. It definitely gives off like a more intimidating look. And then over here we have generals, or generals, leaders, and this was basically going to represent, kind of like the old game, that you would have to have a general to be able to move your units to attack. You could leave garrisons behind, but they weren't going to be able to fight anybody unless they had a general with them. And then finally, we have the one piece that I painted for all the nations, because I was feeling a bit inspired one day, is all the navies. So here we've got all the ships are from the original Conquest of the Empire game, and here we have a trireme for the Carthaginians, and I went all out with these guys because the Carthaginians are like the biggest navy in the game. You know, when they start out, their navy could probably, if nobody built any navies, the Carthaginians could probably amass their fleet and sail around and take out everybody if it had been a more modern level game. But it's very hard to basically, you can't just do, or if my game still existed, you couldn't just basically amass a fleet of like 20 ships and just sail them across the Mediterranean. It was very difficult because you had to move along coastlines and stuff, so you could easily be stopped. So that is the Carthaginians, and now we will get into, let's see who's next. Oh, the Seleucid Empire. So these guys, now I know many of you may not know about some of the more ancient kind of nations of the time, but the Seleucids or Seleucids, depending on how you want to pronounce it, were the empire of the East. They existed mainly like in Persia, kind of had a tenuous hold on areas of Turkey and Anatolia, and a hold on Syria. They were definitely a weaker power, like in the western fringes, so kind of their presence in the Mediterranean. They were definitely not the premier power. The Egyptians and the Greeks were constantly fighting with them, and they were kind of losing their possessions in Anatolia at the time of the First Punic War going on in the western reaches of the Mediterranean. But the one thing that was going to balance them out in my game was that they would receive reinforcements, like by themselves, representing their eastern holdings, because the Seleucids wrapped all the way to around Egypt. They would trade with Egypt. They weren't really on the established. Oh, not in Egypt. India is what I meant. But basically, what they were going to be able to do was every turn they could roll a die and see if they could get some forces to come back from India, which wasn't represented in my game, and basically those forces could travel back and reinforce, give them some extra units to help their conquests in the Mediterranean. And like all, their general is just the same sculpt. And these, the forces that you see here, the heavy infantry, these are from a, I think it was a Persian infantry pack. So these guys are a little predating the kind of time period that I've presented, but they do work pretty well. And as a kind of weakened empire that was mostly trying to dominate the land side of things, their navy is not that big. You know, starting the game, I think they have like one ship, or in real life that would be like a small fleet or squadron. As you can see here, we've got just this kind of intimidating black and gold type deal. So, nice looking navy, but definitely something that you won't see a lot, and this one's a little misshapen, but I tried to make it work. Looks good from the other side though. And so yeah, like I said, they can build a navy. I think it could help them, especially in their fight against Egypt, but it's definitely not their kind of thing to do. And as you can see here, we have the Seleucid flag. Another thing with these roundels is that I like how HBG kind of had to choose, and they did a pretty good job at picking kind of the flags of these nations, because flags really didn't pick up until the 19th century as a predominant thing that you would see representing nations. You know, back in these days, you know, maybe an emperor would have a banner or something, his interpretation of the empire's standard, maybe in his room, but flags weren't something that people could stand by and say, like, so here's the Egyptians. If an Egyptian of the time was shown a symbol like this, they would definitely relate it to their culture, but they wouldn't say, oh, that's the flag of Egypt. So, yeah. But, as I said, these are the Egyptians. Went with a stark white color. And these heavy infantry are also they're a mix of the Persian infantry and some of the Carthaginian infantry. And a pretty good thing about all of these is that at the time, all of these nations, so of course, Greece, Egypt, which was, I forget the pronunciation, Ptolemaic Egypt, and the Seleucids were all basically Alexander the Great's generals who, after Alexander the Great's death, they had divided up his kingdom and or his empire and split it amongst themselves and tried, you know, basically wanted to empower all themselves. So all of these forces are kind of more Greek inspired, because you have the Egyptians, Greeks, and Seleucids, who are all basically Greek heritage and run by Greeks and heavily colonized by Greeks. And then you have the Romans, which of course are kind of, they're not exactly Hellenic in nature, but they picked up a lot of kind of Greek symbols and themes. And then the Carthaginians, who are also, of course, Greek ancestors who broke away and formed their own nation. But here we have the Egyptian Navy. I do like these ships. The color scheme's kind of cool. They have these reddish oars and kind of a green, yellow, and tan color scheme. All the little dots on these, of course, represent men on the top, like Marines that can board other ships. And yeah, so that is the Egyptians. Alright, moving along, we have, the Romans, as most people would want to see. So, the Romans are a little mixed-matched, and I'll tell you why. So basically, of course, when I wanted to paint these guys, the Romans were the first ones that I wanted to paint. So I did give most of them this red color scheme, but things like the infantry, I gave them this primer gray so that I could paint them more easily. As you can see here, we got these these shield guys who are just kind of holding their shields really tight to their bodies. Here we have a probably some kind of general or captain.
Another cool looking kind of leadership figure here. And then we've got these guys are probably some of my favorites just for, I forget the Roman pack that these came in, but as you can see, the detail is really awesome on them. The spears and the shields are separate, so you have to like glue them on, but they allow for such a cool dynamic pose. And so yeah, I really like these guys a lot. And who knows, I may paint these in the future just because they're all primed and ready to go. Here we have some other shield members, and so the reason we have like these kind of weird standing shield guys is that if you were a model builder, you could, with this pack, kind of arrange them so that they could form a phalanx, and you could have, you know, like the spear guys in here and the rest of the formation guarded from, you know, arrows. But for my games, they work well just by being different types of infantry. Here we have the Roman light infantry as standard for the rest of the pieces in this game. The SPRQ banner. Of course, this is more Roman Empire era, where mine would start a little bit about 100 to 200 years before the Empire, but definitely a cool flag that most people that play this game will just associate with the Romans. And then lastly, for the Roman ships, I really like these triremes. These were the first ships that I painted. As you can see, of course, I don't tape off things, so the sheets can be a little weird and wonky. But I mean, back in the day, they would have just been painted or dyed. So, and when they're on the table like this, you don't really care about them too much. And of course, the Romans, you've got like a red and then a blue and green kind of bird-esque head at the front of this trireme. The Romans too have a pretty big fleet because though they don't start with any navy on the board in the beginning of, if you started in the beginning of the First Punic War era, they can definitely pull a real-life Roman Empire, and once they get to a major power and they're fighting Carthage, they're definitely going to want to start pumping out ships, and as you can see there, we've got a lot in there in case that happens. If you check out my Roman Empire or Conquest of the Empire video I did a few months ago, I think about last year, I was doing a Carthage v. Rome game, and the Carthaginians and Romans built like a big fleet. I think the Romans beat the Carthaginians in the arms race, and they had like, it was like a 20-ship fight at the end of the game. So that was a pretty fun one. Alright, and then we have two more nations. So let's see here. We've got the Greeks right here. I don't know why, I never really liked the Greeks that much, but here we have all of these Greeks. Now, of course, taking off of the Pax Romana game, the Greeks are definitely simplified. Like, if you know of this time period, the Greek nation as a whole, kind of the area that you think of Greece, was a ton of just different kingdoms and little empires that were all always fighting over power. And as you know, from like, even from a minor history perspective, you've got, you know, Athens, Crete, Sparta, all these different nations that were trying to kind of fight for territory. Macedonia. These infantry are Theban, which was another Greek state at the time. But I've just used them to represent Greece as a whole. And in this game, Greece kind of works as a unified nation with some little bits of penalties that they get because of how disunified they were in real life. So stuff like they don't get a ton of money, even if they get a big empire, because they're paying for internal wars and conflicts. The flag, so this is a Macedonia-esque flag, like the Greek kingdom of Macedonia. I think that their flag was more of like or their symbols were usually kind of like a sun-shaped object. And I can't remember what flag this is from. I think it's like a Filipino revolution flag from historical board gaming. But I just kind of like, you know, made whatever work, and I think this represents a pretty cool looking flag for the Greeks. And then the Greek Navy, pretty vivid, and starting the game, they have pretty decent navy too, because coming out of the Alexander era of things, they were definitely they had built their massive fleets to take on Egypt and Troy, and it was falling into disrepair. And definitely in the game, you have to pay money to keep ships in operation, and the Greeks definitely aren't the most they aren't rolling in bucks, so their fleet would probably go to disrepair if you don't dedicate a bunch of time and money to funding them. And that is the Greeks, and that is all of the major powers in my game that could have been, but of course are now all the major powers of my Conquest of the Empire game. And getting into some finer line things that we're going to go with my original concept. Now here we have artillery, which are the original Conquest of the Empire pieces. I don't think I had a ton of them. I probably could have used a few more. And Historical Board Gaming does sell them, so does sell some nicer 3D printed ones at that. So yeah, and I spent way too much time on these. As you can see, I kind of they're solid, plastic, because they're older and they didn't have the technology to make them a lot nicer and durable. But I added the black to represent, we've got like the planks used to make the thing. They look really good though. I really like these things. But they're kind of, it's like original anti-aircraft guns where they're kind of just, if people buy these, they're not nation specific. I'm going to be making a video about the elephants of this game because they are a whole nother thing. But I painted up these 172 elephants, which are really nice looking, as you can see from just this one. And there is no elephants implemented in the games, so I have to kind of figure that one out. Another thing that was going to be in my original game were neutral kingdoms. You always hear about Greece and Rome and all these other nations, but there was a lot of neutral, smaller states that, did exist. And so for that, I have specific nations. Now, the only thing I have painted specifically for each one are the ships, so I can show you those. Here we have the Navy of Rhodes. As you can see, a really cool looking navy with the purple and black, a pretty intimidating looking fleet. And for their flags, kind of on their ships, it's supposed to be the Colossus of Rhodes, his head, which is based off of Alexander the Great. So, and you can kind of see the stylized hair and everything. So I like how that looks. And with a fleet of 2 ships, they definitely, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think the Rhodians had a few heavy infantry in a fleet, so they were definitely a bit powerful for an island nation. You would definitely have to muster some forces to take that island by force. As for other ships, now a few ships in my original game were broken. As you can see, this doesn't have a sail, but not all triremes had sails. So for some of the more coastal going fleets, now the Rhodians had to fend off pirates. They would launch patrols. They were kind of like a ancient times Coast Guard. So they would sail around, like I said, defending ports against pirates, and also, maintaining the sovereignty of Rhodes, because they were just an island that was a pretty juicy target for trade for other nations. So by maintaining a large fleet, they could a large ocean-going fleet, they could keep themselves safe. So for some nations that I determined were more of a coastal force, so here we have the nation of Syracuse, not New York, the city-state that existed in on the island of Sicily. They maintain a minor coastal defense force. So as you can see here, we've got another nice-looking purple-black trireme, and this navy, of course, with its proximity to the Romans and also the Carthaginian fleet, is a pushover, but it definitely is there, as a coastal defense force. So if somebody were to try and align the Syracusians, then, the Carthaginians or the Romans could gain another ship out of that. And I'm trying to remember which ships were in here. Okay. We have, I think, so these 2 ships are of different nations. I'm trying to remember. I think that this one was the I forget the name of it. They existed on Anatolia. I think it was the Pergium fleet, and so they were on the western side of Anatolia, kind of southern Turkey today. And as you can see, just a small coastal defense force. And then I am blanking on the name of the nation that this belonged to. Pretty simple, kind of brownish ship. And these were on the northern side, what would have been the northern side of Turkey today, on the Black Sea. And so they are one of the strongest nations, or minor nations in the game. And definitely a big target for someone like the Seleucids to either take on early in the game or try to get to join their side. And as you can see in here, we have all of the neutral kind of infantry, heavy infantry, general. Some of them have generals, some of them don't. And so yeah, that is all of the nations that I've painted up for this game and not painted, and basically, you know, like I said, everything that was going to go towards my massive game that ended up getting lost. So as you can see, a ton of boxes here, a little teaser for the elephants video. We have the big bag of elephants, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this look into my Conquest of the Empire game, or as I said, my most expensive Conquest of the Empire game, the most deluxe version you'll probably ever see. And I hope you enjoyed this look into it, and I hope to see you guys again. Cobra, out.